Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
Gina, I think you're kicking us off, aren't you?
I think so. I think I could do that. I wanted to say Happy Women's History Month to everyone, and ask folks to put a woman in the digital inclusion or digital equity space who inspires you in the chat. Let's get some, or if you have any good like books about women who inspire you. Hi, Isaac. Sorry, I'm getting acclimated to the screen right now, so.
Welcome. You'll find that it's much easier than I make it look.
Okay.
We'll keep an eye on the chat to see what people are putting into it. I'm excited to be here again. Gina is co-hosting for the first time. We'll get to that in a second. Building for Digital Equity is an educational series. We do these live streams 4 times a year. And then we also have a periodic podcast that is aimed to inform and debate digital equity, digital inclusion efforts, as we're trying to make sure that everyone's connected, everyone can take advantage of the internet, that everyone has the tools to succeed in the digital era. Gina is our new co-host, so wonderful to have you on board.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I'm really excited to be your co-host today. Hopefully you'll invite me back for the next one. After today, we'll see how it goes. My name is Gina Cooper Benjamin. I'm the Deputy Director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, or NDIA. I'm located in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm really excited to be here for the first time as a co-host. Just to give you a little bit of background about NDIA, in case you don't know us, NDIA advances digital equity by supporting community programs and equipping policymakers to act. The way that we do that is we provide spaces and opportunities for our community of over 2,000 affiliates now to come together in fellowship and learning and education and fun. And we learn from each other. We have really great conversations. We have really robust listserv. We have an annual conference at Inclusion. What we do with all that learning is we build tools and resources that we provide on our website. You can download them, access them. We just ask you to give us credit for anything you borrow from us. And then we also take what we learn and we do fun things like talk to policymakers and we educate them. Amy Huffman is here and she'll talk a little bit more about that later. We talk a lot about digital equity and digital inclusion. We believe that everyone should have what they need to be able to safely participate in the digital world in a way that is most meaningful for them. To get there, we advocate, we provide tools and resources on low-cost internet, strong device ecosystems with low-cost options, digital skills training, and technical support. Essentially, we talk a lot about technology and digital access while centering humans and human experiences in the process. Someone from my team, I'm sure, or someone backstage will pop a link to the NDIA website in the chat for folks who want to learn more about NDIA. I'm really excited to welcome our guest today.
Sorry, Gina. I was just going to say, I forgot to do something, which was to tell people who I am. I'm Chris Mitchell with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. No, it's not your fault. I was supposed to do it before I introduced you. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance is we're a small nonprofit. We work nationally on a variety of issues, really focused on making sure that communities have local economic power and political power, which is just a fancy way of saying we think people should have a meaningful ability to chart their own course in life while also hopefully respecting the rights of other people. And I also wanted to say that this series is made possible by Utopia Fiber. Utopia Fiber, located mostly in Utah, but also partnering with other communities in other states now to help them connect people. It is the largest open access fiber network in the nation, and they've done really impressive work. And so we're deeply thankful for them for making this series possible. So with that, I think I've checked the boxes that I'm supposed to check.
You did. And I actually noticed that you didn't introduce yourself, but I was just like, I got to roll with the flow right now. This is my first time. I'm not trying to stir any pots right now. So, okay, next time I'll be like, Chris, can you introduce yourself? I'm learning as I go.
Yeah. So, my team knows to just tell me what to do. I take it well.
Okay. So we have a really exciting agenda today. So we're going to start with an icebreaker led by Kyla Williams-Tate. She'll share more about the collaborative community that she started and share her poetic artistry with us. After that, we'll hear from my team member and friend, Amy Huffman, and the brilliant Elisa Valentine, who will give us some policy updates and strategies on how to take action in our current political environments. They'll be followed by one of my hometown heroes, Virginia Benzen, who will talk to us about a bill that she and others in Massachusetts are working on to bring affordable internet to residents. We're trying to start a movement among all the states here. Then we'll close out with a keynote from Doctors Revati Prasad and Colin Rhinesmith, and they will discuss their research around the human infrastructure of broadband.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to step on you, apparently.
No, it's okay. Keep going.
I'm so excited. I love these folks, and in particular, our keynotes. Really excited because Revati had worked with us in the past and is going on to do really wonderful things. We wanted to, before we dive into that exciting thing, though, there's one last bit of homework, which is that the chat is in the past. Gina and I live in the future. So as I'm saying these words, you're going to hear them like 15 seconds later. And so when we ask you to put stuff in the chat, we're going to try to be able to respond to that. If you are listening to this and watching it on like LinkedIn or Facebook or somewhere else, cool. But the best way to participate is YouTube Live, the YouTube page for National Digital Inclusion Alliance. And so that's going to be the easiest place to participate, be part of the chat. And I also wanted to say that net inclusion, I think people will still sign up, right? So
for sure. I'm going to do a plug at the end, but I'm going to do one right now too, since you are prompting me to do it. Net Inclusion is NDIA's annual conference. We bring together thought leaders like yourselves across the country to discuss everything digital inclusion related. We have topics like AI, youth voice conversations on digital skills, conversations on digital navigators, coalitions, you name it, we got it. Regular registration closes March 31st. That's coming up real quick. And late registration opens April 1st, at which time registration prices will go up. So please try to register before March 31st. I'm going to do that again at the end too, Chris. FYI.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it. Who do we got up first?
We have up first the multi-hyphenate, Kyla Williams-Tate. Kyla is the Marjorie and Charles Benton Opportunity Fund Fellow and Collaborative Community Founder. Heavy on the art. The collaborative community is where creativity connects, inclusion inspires, and art unites. Kyla, I've been fortunate to hear you perform at another virtual event in the past, and I'm excited to listen to what you've prepared for today. Can you kick us off?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the Community Broadband Networks, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and the National Digital Inclusion Alliance for the invitation. The poem I'm about to share, For Those Yet Connected, is a tribute to unity, resilience, and the fight for digital equity. It's inspired by those who tirelessly work to break barriers, ensuring that no one is left behind in our increasingly digital world. We stand here, not as scattered voices, but as a woven chorus, a fabric stitched with purpose, each thread holding stories of struggle and hope. You know why you began this. You remember the faces, the unreachable behind barriers made of code, cost, and neglect. You remember how you broke them down piece by piece, brick by stubborn brick. Yet, listen. The wind carries whispers of division, lies sharpened into spears, crafted to pierce our resolve. They want you to forget. Forget the children waiting for a connection. Forget the elders searching for dignity in a digital world. Forget the hands we once clasped together, vowing to build bridges and tear down the walls. But we will not forget. Not today, not tomorrow. Not when the path grows steep and the shadows lengthen. Stand. Even when your knees quake, stand. Even when the world tells you to sit down, stand for the ones who cannot. Stand against those who weaponize what we forged for justice. Stand and shout until the falsehoods crumble under the weight of truth as it presses the air from their lies. We are the architects of access, the keepers of a promise that no one, and I mean no one, will be left behind. Do not go silent. Lift your voice loud enough to carry across the chasm of fear and doubt. Tell the stories of triumph because they need to know. There is power in persistence. Tell the stories of challenge because in each crack lies the seed of change. We resist, not to survive, but to thrive. We choose one another unflinchingly, unapologetically, a bond forged not in convenience, but of conviction. And yes, it will get hard. It will test us in ways we do not yet understand. But remember, we have already begun to rewrite the ending. So step back. See the broad strokes of what we've sketched together, a future better than the past dared dream. This is not their story. It's our story. It always was. Now tell me, are you with me? And that's the piece. Please give a thumbs up or comment in the chat if you are with me. We are fighting the good fight for digital equity. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. Before I close, I want to share something exciting. I've launched an initiative called the Collaborative Community, a space for performing literary, visual, and mixed media artists who are passionate about digital inclusion, equity, and opportunity. It's a platform to connect, collaborate on projects, and amplify your creative voice on the local and global stages. I'll be dropping the website and link to the interest form in the chat. So if this community resonates with you, I would love for you to join. And then speaking of Net Inclusion 2025, I'll be hosting a session titled Voices of Digital Inclusion, a creative showcase of art, music, and words. We're recruiting participants to share their art. And of course, everyone is welcome to attend. So thank you again. And I hope you'll continue standing for connection and creativity. See you soon.
Thank you, Kyla. Do you mind hanging out for 1 second with us? I'm going to start my fight by fighting back these tears. My gosh, I
It was
am
very
like so
touching.
moved.
Yes.
Yes. Oh gosh. Okay.
I still have like some goosebumps. I'm trying to get rid of them.
Yes. Okay. Do we have questions? I know we have at least one question that we had when someone registered that I'd like for you to answer. Okay.
I would just, Kyla, something that resonated with me, and I hope that people will put something that resonated with them in the chat. We've got a lot of hearts, fire, thumbs up. When you said we choose each other, that's the part that really hit home, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a time where we don't feel like we have a lot of options, but the option to choose each other and move forward together, linked, being even more deeply collaborative in our opportunities, sharing more of our stories, being a safe space for some tears and maybe just some questions and some doubts about what the future holds for this work. We are a strong and mighty community, and I really want us to be encouraged to really cleave to each other. I feel like that is a way that we can help to continue to be impactful in the spaces yet among such uncertainty.
Yeah, I would also say the shaking knees, it resonates because like you don't always see it in people that you see standing up and you feel like are stronger than you, but it feels like it it's really there. But I'll sit here and hit all the things that I loved about that work, but I want to ask you what inspired collaborative?
So collaborative was really inspired because I am an artist. I, singer, songwriter, poetry. This is kind of like, my passion space. And I know that there are others in our digital inclusion, digital equity, digital opportunity spaces that also are talented artists or art enthusiasts or just love being in that creative space. And I just wanted to create a community. There's a lot of communities around there that we can connect with, but there was nothing that I thought was specific to like merging art and technology, and wanted to really just do my part, my little part, to create a space for us to gather, to share art, and to continue to transform our communities using our collective voices. And so the inspiration really came as a call to action, you know, from the divine and from the community. Like, I just wanted to do something. Again, not having clear direction of what to do. I just wanted to do something that I felt was in my power to do. And so far, I think it's gaining traction, and certainly more people are interested and participating. We had our first informational last week and had great conversations. So you'll be able to see that webinar and participate if you want to. Like, we welcome you. We're building community, you know, one person at a time, one heart at a time, one art at a time, one piece of art at a time.
Gina, I don't want to cut off without you having a chance to respond. You got any closing comments?
I don't. I am on the verge of fighting tears now. So thank you, Kyla, for this morning cry. Could you, in the chat, could you link to the collaborative website?
Yes, I will do that now. Yes. Okay.
Wanted to start off a little lighter today. And here I
Thank you so much, Kyla. Yeah. I look forward to seeing you in Net Inclusion.
Thank you so much. Wow, I'm like beyond moved right now. Okay, we're going to move on to our next guest. So our next guest is Amy, a proud North Carolinian and NDIA's policy director.
Who is not thrilled about having to follow Kyla.
Are you serious? Like, I have to follow that?
I know.
Tears, like everything.
It's so hard. I know.
But so inspiring.
So Amy, last week you went to DC for a Hill Day with some NDIA team members and some NDIA community members. Can you tell us more like about what that was like, what the climate's like down there? Like, what comes next? How do you feel?
Yeah, so let me actually kind of flip it, if you don't mind, and talk about like why we were there. And next time I'm bringing Kyla, because goodness gracious, like that might, having her speak in front of a hearing might change everything. Good, who knows? So we were there to talk about the Digital Equity Act programs, which, as I think everyone that's probably tuning in understand, are at risk because of the name, right? Digital equity has a word in it that is not in vogue, or as some people say, has a branding problem, right? And the funds are at risk also because they're not all obligated. So just like a quick reminder, there's basically two pots of funds. There were grants that went to states for creating robust digital equity or digital opportunity plans. And then states and territories receive funding to go implement those plans. And then there's a bucket of funds, and those were called the capacity grants. And then there's a bucket of funds that go out to individual organizations across the country called competitive grants. As of December 2024, all the states and I believe territories, although let me not say that because I don't remember, all the states had their capacity grants. And on the competitive grant side, at the first of the year-ish, a little bit before January 20th, NTI recommended for award 65 projects out of the competitive grant program. And there's about a third of the funds left in that like bucket of funds that they made available this round that are still not spoken for, are not allocated, not recommended for award. And I'm using the word recommended for award because that means that those grants are not finalized. Okay. 61 out of the 65. So that means only 4 grants out of that 65 are obligated and have a signed contract. The other 61 do not. And then there's another third of the funds that are still yet to be allocated. And then if I go back to the states for a second, while I said they already have their money, technically they really only have 60% of it. There will be 2 more tranches or 2 more buckets coming down the road. So about 40% of the capacity funds are still not allocated. that's a future, like it, and will be done in the future. So all that to say, it's a lot of detail, but there's a lot that can happen to all of these funds, and that makes them at risk. And we, collectively as a community, all believe that these funds are necessary, needed, and support the great work that you do. And so we're working really diligently to make sure that Congress is aware of that. And so a big part of that strategy was going to DC last week, and we brought 22 people from across the country. We had a lot of really great partners. One of whom you're about to hear from, Elisa Valentine from Public Knowledge. We had Public Knowledge and Open Technology Institute and Free Press and Media Justice and several other partners who came alongside us and supported us in this and walked, like literally walked the halls of Congress with our folks. A couple like exciting things. We had over 60 meetings, which is a lot. Like that's really great, with representatives from over 16 states. We got to sit in on a live hearing that was happening on broadband with the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which is the committee that oversees technology and telecom and broadband and digital equity issues. And so got to sit in on that hearing. Some of the folks we brought with us, like their representatives, like members of Congress, were on that committee and asking questions. So it was exciting. I will say overall, well, number one, the Hill buildings were the busiest I've ever seen them. Lines wrapped around the door outside. So clearly we weren't the only ones thinking that we needed to go talk to our members of Congress. Which is exciting. It's exciting that we're seeing people take part in the democratic process. And part of that democratic process is educating your members of Congress to make sure they understand about the work that you do, right? And so I think what was really exciting is we were warmly received. We talked about the work beneath the words. And I say that intentionally because we talked a lot about how digital navigators help get seniors devices when they don't have any, or about how some programs really focus in on making sure people can get access to their doctor via telehealth, right? We gave real life examples about the work in the communities. And so that when those members are seeing Digital Equity Act pop up as something that might be cut or just might be changed by the administration, that they know what that work looks like in their communities, and there's a human face to it, right? And I'll say we actually had good reception across the aisle, right? From both parties. And so I left, number one, just so thankful and so inspired by our 2,000 affiliates. Like you all are, and anyone else who does digital inclusion work are just so amazing. Like I am so inspired by Kyla's poem because I get the opportunity to choose you, and we at NDI, we choose you. And so I was so inspired by getting to spend time with our affiliates. I was also inspired to continue this because I learned along the way that education's half the battle. Making sure that we voice what these programs are and how important they are. People listen. And that's really exciting. So I'll stop there. I think there might be questions. I hope I didn't go over my time.
Oh, so we actually had to end the show. We didn't want to tell you.
No one's here anymore. Okay, got it.
Thank you for that. There was a question in the chat that I just wanted to do a quick response on, which was asking about BEAD dollars and where they're going. And so for the infrastructure dollars, we don't actually know yet, but the signs suggest that they're being spread around a lot of different internet service providers. There's uncertainty with that program as well. So with a lot of this stuff, we don't know. Amy, I don't know if you heard anything about the likely nomination or the nomination confirmation hearing about Ariel Roth, but she's been nominated to run NTIA, and I think many of us suspect that we can't get an answer on some of this stuff until she is confirmed and NTIA has an agency head.
I think that's right. Yeah, we were hearing it might be as soon as this week, but it has not happened this week. So we'll see hopefully soon, because I think you're right, Chris. We won't know until there's someone in there leading the work on how a lot of this will shake out.
Okay. Gina, do you have any questions, or should we go to the prepared one?
Well, I was just going to go to the prepared one.
Go for it.
Okay. So Amy, someone submitted a question as part of the registration process about some of the terminology. So you hit the nail on the head. You said there's a branding problem, right? We know that. The words diversity, equity, and inclusion are words that a lot of people hesitate to say. I do not hesitate to say them because I don't have to. But when people do have to hesitate to say those words, what is your guidance for what you're seeing across the country and how people get the point across? We all have the same goal here. It's not like we have different goals just because we're using different words. How are you suggesting to people you could still get your point across, and maybe hear some alternatives too?
Yeah, I think it is focusing on the words beneath the work, the work beneath the words. Oh, goodness, I got it backwards. Like what the work actually looks like. And it's really communications 101, advocacy 101. You speak to the audience you're talking to. So you find what it is they care about. If it's workforce, you talk about workforce and how your work impacts jobs in your community. If it's healthcare, which is a big topic right now, how telehealth makes sure that veterans can talk to their doctors at the VA, right? Or if it's older adults, how making sure that cybersecurity training is available to them to protect them from scams online. So it's talking about the work. Which, frankly, like we need to do anyways. Half the time when I talk to people about digital equity, they're like, what's that? So like, I always have to explain it. So now we're just getting a little bit sharper with how and quicker on our feet of what resonates with folks.
Yeah. If I could suggest, and you can let me know if I'm way off base here. It's never happened before, so it would be a surprise. But when I'm having a conversation with someone and it's not going well sometimes, and I'm not finding the right words, I find it can be helpful to go back to a discussion I had or a place that I was, and to relate what I learned from that, and to say, rather than talking about what digital equity is, to say, I, as a digital navigator, I met this person and we talked about this thing and we helped them to resolve this problem. And now that person was better able to succeed in life. They were able to go on and accomplish new tasks, get better employment, or, something like that. That is something that resonates with just about anyone without triggering some of the feelings that certain words might.
That's exactly right, Chris. That's absolutely right. The story is about the people and why it matters. That's what we need to fall back on. We can call it digital opportunity, digital access, whatever people want to call it. I would say, just like from my limited meetings with members, they're they see past that. So we just address the elephant in the room. Like, we understand Digital Equity Act words are challenging, but let us tell you why these programs matter, and point it to the humans that do the work.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for going to DC and having those conversations. And it's wonderful to know that you're out there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good to see y'all.
Absolutely. Gina's about to describe the person who's either the single best or second best, depending on your position, export from the wonderful community of Tifton, Georgia. And some of you know the inside joke that comes from that. Go ahead, Gina.
Thank you, Chris. Next up, we have Elisa Valentin. Elisa is a travel content creator. I'll have to talk to you about that later. And broadband policy director at Public Knowledge, where she focuses on ensuring all consumers have access to affordable, reliable broadband. Elisa is here to reassure us that our anxieties, some of these things we're experiencing now, they're pretty well placed. But she's also going to share some strategies for how we can redirect some of that energy. So Elisa, can you take us away?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. First, thank you to Institute for Local Self-Reliance and also National Digital Inclusion Alliance. So excited to be here today. And I should say that I'm a travel content creator wannabe. Okay, that's the goal, right? After I'm done with policy, that's what I'm going to be doing. But my name is Elisa Valentine. Again, I'm Broadband Policy Director at Public Knowledge. We're a consumer advocacy organization based in Washington, D.C., working on a range of tech and telecom policy issues, but including but not limited to closing the digital divide as it relates to broadband access, broadband adoption, and broadband affordability. So I really just want to build on what Amy discussed regarding the recent Hill Days hosted by NDIA last week and provide some quick tips on how to effectively engage with elected officials concerning Saving a Digital Equity Act funding, which, as Amy described, is currently experiencing a pause, prioritizing affordability in any effort to close digital divide, particularly because the Affordable Connectivity Program that you all know connected 23 million households no longer exists because Congress did not refund it. Okay, it's very much so their fault, right? And it's because there was a lack of political will. And also making sure that we're urging policymakers to ensure that the networks that are built in unserved and underserved communities are resilient. So Gina from NDIA and our producer, Jordan from Tifton, Georgia, he asked, you all asked that I talk to you about some quick tips when you're in advocacy meetings, who to talk to, how to approach them, what to do in a meeting, and also how to follow up. So first, who to talk to. It's important to know whether your member of Congress or senator sits on a committee that oversees these issues. You just heard Amy talk about that. We like to call them the committees of jurisdiction. Those key committees are House Energy and Commerce Committee, and then the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. If your representative is on one of those committees, that's an added advantage because they work on these issues daily and they have oversight over agencies like the Federal Communications Commission and like the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, right? Those are the expert agencies on broadband policy. That said, even if your elected official is not on one of those committees, you should still reach out to them, right? Every member of Congress has staffers who handle telecom issues, and they're engaging with those issues on a daily basis. Now, they have huge portfolios, so they might be also engaging on issues related to, wildlife and fishing, and also telecom might be in their portfolio. So as it relates to, how to kind of approach these folks, it's really, really important that you reach out to folks by phone. I know maybe people who are, Gen Z may be rolling their eyes at me by saying that right now, but reach out to them by phone. Call the office, ask to speak to the staffer who handles telecom issues. Then don't just say telecom, say telecom, broadband, digital divide issues, right? Because you don't know what people don't know. Some voicemails may be full right now. We're hearing that on the Hill, but persistence is key. Then send an email. Keep it concise but informative. 2 paragraphs are usually enough. Describe who you are, your organization, what you represent. And then we also love links and attachments, right, with relevant information. When you're contacting these staffers, you might say, I'd like to speak with you about broadband affordability and adoption. Our state or district is set to receive however $1 million in Digital Equity Act funding. My organization has been recommended for this funding, right? You might say, since the Affordable Connectivity Program lapsed a year ago, my community members right now are struggling to afford broadband. I'd like to discuss potential solutions to ensure that they are connected. Then you set up a time to speak with them. Moving on to the meeting portion. When you're in a meeting, make your direct ask at the beginning. Start by introducing yourself, explaining why you're there, and clearly stating what you're asking for. Then expand on the issue. Describe the real-world consequences of not securing this funding. You might say something like, let me explain why we'll be impacted if there's no clarity about the next steps. Let me explain to you how my business or my community will suffer if this funding disappears, right? And as you just heard folks discuss, true impact stories are really powerful. If you can share a personal story that illustrates the stakes, that is really helpful. You might say, there's a senior in my community named Miss Wanda. She's on a fixed income and was thrilled about the Affordable Connectivity program because it allowed her to stay connected, but now it's gone and she's forced to make impossible choices, right? At the end of the day, this is about promises made and promises kept, right? Policymakers need to act. What moves people, as you just heard Amy describe, people hearing about the economic impacts, right? How communities and businesses are impacted. You guys know efficiency is a hot word right now. So having you all describe that broadband can help make government more efficient, right? How does it alleviate the time tax of people traveling, waiting, and submitting paperwork by hand? I think also kind of the intersection of artificial intelligence and global competition, right? In order for us to benefit economically from the AI revolution, people have to be connected to broadband. They have to have the skills needed to participate in this revolution. Again, personal stories and also key demographics. We want to hear about seniors, rural communities, low income families, parents with kids, business owners. How are they being impacted? Why? Because everyone knows a senior, right? Everyone knows someone who owns a business, a parent, a child, right? Everyone has a grandparent or an elderly neighbor. Just make it relatable. That's what moves decision makers to act. And then also, take notes during the meeting and follow up strategically. While you're in the meeting, pay attention to what resonates most with the policymakers or staffers. Take notes on the questions they ask. And let me say, it is okay if you do not know the answers on the spot. That's what this community is for, right? When you follow up, be clear and direct about your ask. Remember, people process information differently. Some may retain more information from a conversation, while others need a direct email. Either way, your goal is to eliminate any confusion, right? And from my experience, when I've worked in policymakers' offices, at the FCC, I do not like leaving meetings when I'm like, what was the ask here, right? So make sure that you're clear and upfront. And then lastly, maintain the relationship. Invite them to your events. Bring policymakers to your community. Acknowledge their presence when they're there, right? And then lastly, collaborate and share information with this community. Ask folks what they're hearing. Does this align with what you've been told? Who is the best messenger to move forward on this? That is why coalitions matter. I hope this is helpful. I know the NDIA and ILSR have great advocacy resources, but if anyone has any questions for me, my email is simply elisa@publicknowledge.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elisa. And Public Knowledge, wonderful organization. I'm so glad that you're there, making it even stronger. There's time for a question or two, and I'm trying to figure out which one. And what I settled on, because I would like to ask you so many, is I'm assuming that an argument that you should make to a Democratic staffer is probably different than one you'd make to a more Republican one. We're going to share a link to a really great study from the Brattle Group, I think the name is, about how the ACP actually paid for itself. I find it very persuasive. I don't know if more conservative members of Congress would find it as persuasive. Can you just give us a sense of like, what is an argument to use and what is one maybe that will not resonate as well with the conservative folks in the Hill right now?
I'll tell you the conversations I've been having with Republican offices on the Hill. I remind them of who the lead co-sponsor was for refunding the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is the now Vice President J.D. Vance. Right. That is what I remind them of. Right. And I also, remind them of the fact that the folks in red states were signing up for ACP, even more so, right, than folks in blue states. Just remind them of that data. Data also moves people, right? And then again, just reminding them of the connections between the Affordable Connectivity Program, BEAD, and Digital Equity Act, and how they were, all passed in the infrastructure law because they were all meant to work together. And I think that, when it comes to a lot of people too, having the conversation about like, okay, if you have these small broadband providers that are building out these more remote areas, people have to be able to afford it, right? Or else you're just going to have a network that's just there. So those types of things I think are really resonating with the offices that I've been talking to on the Hill.
We did hear some questions along those lines, and I agree with you. I think there's concerns about just telling rural ISPs they have to figure it out on their own. There needs to be some kind of federal resource. But Gina, did you have a last question before we kick Elisa out, unfortunately?
Yeah, so there is a question that was submitted with another person who registered. I like when people submit questions when they register, so I want to kind of try to get to some of them. And it is speaking to that the rural aspect, but specifically some of the BEAD stuff, Elisa. So I will ask, how do we address the low cost option requirement in BEAD for rural areas of persistent poverty? That is a question I've heard asked in different ways too, and different conversations. So, and then a question about the expected timeline for BEAD, if you have that available.
I don't know, because everything is made up right now. That's how it feels to me, right? But what I would say, it's important. I know I was kind of talking about, on the federal level, talking to your members of Congress, talking to senators. I would also say it's really important that you talk with the folks in states, because there are actions that states can take to make sure that broadband is affordable as well. And so that's also what I would definitely recommend, because I think it's really going to take, all the tools in the toolkit to make sure that folks are able to have affordable broadband. So I think making sure that we revive the Affordable Connectivity Program through Universal Service Fund reform, making sure that we protect the BEAD program. I think that's really important. And then again, building those relationships with folks in those state offices, I think that's going to be really important in this fight ahead.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Elisa. Nice to have you. Okay, Chris, before we introduce our next guest, I have a trivia question for everyone. Okay.
All right. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
Wait, I know this one. Go
ahead. In January, a New York law began requiring large ISPs to offer a $15 per month plan for qualifying low income households. That's a mouthful. Sorry. It's also on the screen. Select all of the states that have introduced similar legislation.
And because we're running a little bit behind, we're gonna run right into it and explain what it is and move on to the next guest.
Okay, got it.
But I do want to say that the answers are A, C, and E: California, Massachusetts, Vermont, and we'll see if other states get on it. It's a good time to start planning ahead for next year, even, and working, if you're interested in this sort of thing, to be working over the summer and fall to prepare your legislature for the next year. But we are going to, and I don't want to be disrespectful, I would like to talk about some of the great points Elisa had, but we are going to move on to the next guest.
That happens sometimes. I think people understand we're running just a little bit behind, but thank you, Elisa, for joining. Speaking of Massachusetts, though, Virginia Benzen is joining us. Like myself, Virginia is a proud Bostonian and the director of racial justice advocacy at the Mass Law Reform Institute and new leadership of the Massachusetts Digital Equity Coalition. I first met Virginia over coffee at the Dudley Cafe when she was working to sign community members up for their Affordable Connectivity Program. And now she's working with a group of community members across the state to create a broadband service for low-income consumers. Virginia, can you share more about the bill that you are working on with us and how it all came together?
Sure. And first, I want to say, Kyla, I'm with you. I've been so inspired today. And so thank you for having me be a part of today. MLRI, or Mass Law Reform, is an anti-poverty policy center. And I am, as you mentioned, the director of racial justice advocacy and digital equity. As the late John Lewis said, is the civil rights movement or issue of our 21st century. And so in Massachusetts, we wanted to follow, we are a well-connected state. So about 98% of our state has the infrastructure to access the internet, but we have seen that cost remains the biggest barrier for people to get connected. So about 10% of our households are still not connected to the internet. 50% of the people we surveyed said that the reason for that was the cost. We talked about the Affordable Connectivity Program. We had over 370,000 households in Massachusetts benefiting from that program. That's about 14% of our households. And in some areas, that was 1 in 4 households. So it was a very important and useful program in Massachusetts. And again, it's not the digital divide with those who cannot get connected or have the infrastructure. It was really the infrastructure is in place and we needed something to address affordability. So following the New York Affordable Internet Act, Massachusetts has, has introduced a bill called the Broadband Internet Access Service for Low-Income Consumers. Senator Pavel Payano and Representative Rita Mendez filed it in both the Massachusetts House and Senate legislature. It's now before the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. And similar to that, to the New York bill, it requires internet service providers to offer a flat rate, low-cost internet plan for qualifying low-income consumers. So $15 for 100 megabytes per download, which is a new federal definition of high speed, and $20 for 200 megabytes. There is a waiver for those internet service providers that come through municipal organizations, and the flat rate includes taxes and fees. Eligibility mirrors eligibility for the ACP program, which is 200% of the federal poverty level, or participation in a federal benefits program like food stamps, or veterans benefits, or public housing. And so we're hopefully to join the New York movement. I can share the flyer so you can take it down. I can share the flyer with folks, and also share a link if you'd like to get more information about it. It imposes a $1,000 fine for ISPs who fail to comply. It requires them to promote and advertise their bill. This plan and provides a review of the speed and the prices frequently. And so what we're seeing, as we all know, internet is no longer a luxury, but as for one instance, as the federal staff gets reduced, the ability for people to walk into an office is going to be significantly impacted, right? So you're not going to be able to go into your local Social Security office. You're not going to be able to walk into your local Department of Transitional Assistance office, and you'll have to either use the phone, which we know thousands of phone calls are being dropped by these agencies every day because they can't handle capacity. And so what they're doing is really pushing everybody to the internet. And so once we do that, we have to make sure that people have access to the internet, and we need to make sure that it is high speed and reliable, because we need people to be able to meaningfully participate in society. We need people to meaningfully participate for economic mobility. We know that 90% of jobs now require some digital equity skills. And so this bill right now is, it's the beginning of our legislature session. We have a 2-year cycle. It started in January. The bill this week went into the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. And so we're just wanted to spread word that this bill is available, and we'd love for people to join, just if you want to hear more updates about the bill, or have any questions, or would like some more information, or we'd love feedback. The language really mirrors a lot of what we saw in New York, but we're open to making it better.
Thank you. One of the things that I'm immediately curious about is whether this is a sign of state legislatures realizing that problems with internet access are not solely reduced to rural gaps in infrastructure. Is that something that you feel like the legislature is understanding?
Yeah, I think in most states, when we talk about the digital divide, it's often rural versus urban. And in a place like Massachusetts, where really the biggest divide is in our urban areas and having access to high-speed internet and reliable ones. We're an old state. Our infrastructure is very old. The cement is very thick. So you needed to really think about those things when we were creating our internet structures. And when we talk about looking at people's identities, like people who are older, or who speak different language or have disabilities, we want to be very careful that those aren't the barriers. The barriers are those people were not considered at the onset of these programs. And so I think now, as we're really seeing the impact of the internet and how people are using it and how powerful and transformational it is, and seeing that in a state where we have technology, we're the state of technology. We're up there, right? Everybody is pretty well advanced. And even that in a state like Massachusetts, we're still lagging behind and closing that divide.
Gina, I'll keep talking if you don't want to unmute
No,
yourself.
okay, I do have a question. So I do have a question. So Virginia,
Sure.
I already know all the things. And so I want to ask a question that I think may help people who are listening in if they are interested in getting something like this started in their states. I know that a lot of this work that you're doing is in collaboration with the coalition, the Mass Digital Equity Coalition. And so having the coalition play a role in this, could you explain how that came about and the importance of the coalition to like move this forward and just the role of the coalition in general in digital equity in the state?
Right, that's a great question. Well, first it started off, we were at a convening, like just a panel sort of like similar to this. It was a bigger convening that our state digital kind of partners called MBIA held. And one of the questions, because I do advocacy, was, you know, what can we do at the state level? If we see that the federal government is not going to take this up, what can we do at the state level? And that was a question posed to me. And I said, what would you guys like to do? Like, what do you know, we need to hear from folks. And so after that, we came up with the idea of like looking at New York and seeing where that was going to do, what was happening with them. And when the Supreme Court failed to review that case, we're like, it's a go, let's do it. Let's just follow their lead, even though we're from Massachusetts and we don't like to follow anything New York does. We were happy in this instance to do that. And so one thing is that it really, we're still trying to figure out our coalition. It's now being moved under my leadership. So right now it's really just about spreading the word about the bill. I think it's very confusing times about what people can do, especially with lobbying. And it's really just a resource for information right now, helping us decide on sort of language and important issues. We know we need more consumer protections, for instance, in this bill. So that's really where the coalition is. But you really need to talk to more folks, and it's really just communication and collaboration and offering that space.
I did it. The cardinal sin. I did it. Thank you, Virginia.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
We have an impromptu trivia question. The trivia question is, do we have time for a trivia question? The answer is no. So we're moving ahead. Want to make sure that Revati and Colin have plenty of time to be talking about their keynote. And by way of introduction, Gina, is there anything you want to add before I roll into the introduction?
No, just that I love both of our keynotes. So I'm really excited to hear about their research.
Yes. So both of our keynoters are people that have done really impressive work. Revati Prasad, Vice President of Programs at Benton Institute for Broadband and Society, soon to be the Executive Director. Congratulations. Soon to be in charge of everything. Also had been with us, and we held her back as long as we could on behalf of Comcast and the others. But now she's out in the world. We also have Colin Rinesmith, who co-wrote this paper, visiting associate professor at the School of Information Scientists at the University of Illinois, which is in Urbana-Champaign. Welcome, Colin.
Thanks for having me.
So we are going to ask you to talk about the human infrastructure of the internets and the human infrastructure of broadband. Actually, Revati and I have talked about it a bit behind the scenes, so I have a little bit of a preview. But what we want to know is, how can we support the digital inclusion field and really sustain this work over the long term? So Gina and I are going to go back. I'm waiting for a milkshake to show up at my door, and then we'll be back to ask some questions of you in about 10 minutes.
Well, that's not fair. What's not fair?
Not fair, but it's...
That was delicious.
All over the slides.
You can't. Well, I'm not sure if you can. If you have a button there that says next slide, then you can click it. Otherwise, you have to tell Jordan to click it.
All right. Jordan, I'm going to rely on you. Thank you, Chris and Gina and Jordan, for being the magic behind the scenes. We're very excited to be presenting this work that's been cooking for a while. I'm going to do some scene setting for the project and go through the first half of the research, and then I'll be handing off to my co-author and collaborator for this project, Dr. Colin Rinesmith. This was a very collaborative project. Colin and I get to be up here and take our bow and be here for our close-up. But we worked with NDIA and ALA. We worked with researchers who wrote the case studies and a ton of experts in the field who we locked in various Zoom rooms for long stretches of time. The why Chris already alluded to. The goal of this work has been sustainability. The sustainability of the critical digital support that so many of you likely provide. Support also that I think we all know will be needed beyond the life of this current Digital Equity Act. COVID, as we know, brought a ton of attention to how necessary this work was, but we wanted to think about what will happen after the current federal investment has ended, if it begins. Okay, next slide. First thing I should talk about is really the term itself. What do we mean by infrastructure and what do we mean by the human part? The definition that has always strongly resonated with me is Brian Larkin's, the objects that create the grounds upon which other objects operate. And when they do so in a network. So this is your classic example is roads. They allow for the movements of goods and people and they interconnect. We're arguing that the work of connecting people to devices or broadband services or skills is the undergirding that allows a digital economy and digital society to flourish and benefit us all. So direct digital support. And like roads or other infrastructure, we're pointing out that this work of the human infrastructure of broadband does not occur in isolation, but rather as part of a larger digital inclusion ecosystem. Part of calling the work infrastructure is branding. Other scholars have proposed the idea of community infrastructure and social infrastructure, and we're taking a page out of their book to underscore the critical importance of this work. Fiber is just glass on the ground if you can't connect to it or use it. And I stole that from Chris Ali, Dr. Chris Ali, who you might know. And we also really wanted to reiterate that this work is deeply and profoundly human. It requires patience to explain and perhaps explain again how to do something that might have become second nature to us, the humility to know that evolving technologies can leave us behind as well. It's complex work, not just because demonstrating someone's eligibility for subsidized broadband can be a Byzantine process, but it also has a deeply affective component. I think every digital navigator worth their salt will tell you shame, fear, anxiety, excitement, pride, they're all part and parcel of this work. So that's sort of the preamble. What do we actually do? Next slide, please. We did this project in phases. The first thing we did was reflected in the first report that we released was to do a look back, a look around, and then begin a process of looking ahead. So we put together the historical overview of how the concepts of universal access and digital divide have sort of progressed in conjunction with technology itself. And then we conducted a landscape assessment of the ongoing work in the field. We did a survey, we worked with NDIA's digital navigator inventory, and we put together a database of 250 plus programs. We analyzed these 250 programs to sort of produce a taxonomy of the different kind of programs that are happening in the field right now. Next slide. Our taxonomy basically includes three groups. We have the core, complementary, and coalition. And it hinges on the difference between them is how does direct digital support fit into their mission. So for the core category, we're saying digital equity is the center of their work, right? They focus first and foremost on information services or digital equity services. So here's libraries or nonprofits that are solely or primarily focused on digital equity. In the complementary category, we include organizations that have a wider mission but have added digital equity work because they understand that digital equity will help them serve their broader mission. So a healthcare organization that recognizes that you need to get people online if they're going to be able to use telehealth services. Excuse me. And we also found important to highlight coalitions. Now, the individual organizations in a coalition may be core or complementary, but together they are addressing digital equity. And they're critical for advocacy, agenda setting, resource sharing, and sort of disseminating learnings in the field. Next slide. while the survey was about establishing the breadth of the field and sort of the diversity of programs happening, we then conducted about a dozen case studies, we conducted a dozen case studies across all 3 program types to sort of delve into sort of the distinct ways in which they operate and what their comparative advantages are. In the interest of time, I'm just going to skip to the next slide. Once we had gotten this far, we started combining experts in 3 groups according to the services provided. So device access and maintenance, free and affordable service, and digital skills. And basically we locked them up and we asked them questions about what is working, so we could see emerging best practices, and then what is needed. And we took that, what is needed, to a group of policy entrepreneurs to ask them, okay, this is what the field understands about what is happening, what is good, what is working, and what is needed. Help us make it happen. Help us create a policy and sustainability infrastructure that can make it actionable and sustainable. And for that, I'm going to pass this on to Colin.
Thank you so much, Revati. And next slide, please. So as Revati mentioned, I think one of the wonderful things about this project is it really draws upon the incredible expertise of this field. Many of the people who are on this call, others who hopefully are watching, but all of the work happening in communities across the country, essentially making this case that we will need people and organizations that help connect others to the internet, because the existing digital divide is largely an artifact of entrenched economic and racial disparities, because new technologies will emerge, causing our devices and skills to become outdated, and as our lives become ever more digitized in the ways that you've heard in this call, I think, today. Next slide, please. And so the framework, if you download the report and you take a look, we were able to synthesize all of the wonderful advice and feedback from the policy entrepreneurs that we heard from across these 2 different areas. Essentially, there was a set of recommendations that were focused on what we call systems-focused change, so broader change at the sort of, well, we'll talk about that in a second, but essentially focused on policy and funding. And then another set of recommendations focused on what can we do in the field as practitioners, as people working in the space, to help people connect to devices, help people connect to broadband and digital literacy skills. And so that had to do with building the constituency as well as building the capacity of the field itself. And the next slide, please. So just a couple of examples of what we mean by systems-focused work. Here we see ensuring a supportive policy environment that builds on existing wins and establishes incentives and oversight for future progress. So this includes 2 things in particular here. We have, so creating a national or a state level permanent affordable broadband benefit, as we've heard, and a fantastic example from Virginia and the incredible work building on the work in New York State. But also, as well as, hopefully at some point we will also have another federal broadband benefit. We know that it is one of the largest barriers, but also empowering state offices to conduct ongoing oversight as well. And then another area, as you can see here, is developing innovative approaches to financing this work. So creating mechanisms within state budgets to provide local digital inclusion funds, but also integrating, and this is where the sort of complementary focus of our project is really thinking about not only the core organizations like public libraries that do this work, but integrating direct digital support funding into housing programs, telehealth, workforce development. So thinking of the broad sort of area that we can involve creative approaches to financing. But also there's a role for place-based philanthropy. We saw this throughout the pandemic, incredible place-based philanthropic efforts responded to COVID, but also thinking about ways that we can continue to leverage these incredible local investments. But also employing market-based mechanisms like, I believe, CDFIs, I think, community development financing for e-commerce revenue, and also easing administrative burdens on small organizations. Next slide, please. And so just a couple examples here as we begin to wrap up our presentation, focused on sort of the field focus side of this work. And really, what do we mean by building a constituency? One of the things that's great about this community, ILSR is doing incredible work, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, building a broad constituency of diverse stakeholders from the business community, the financial institutions, and others that represent our most vulnerable populations in our communities. And we can continue this work. And I think through the great examples that we've heard on this call about how to engage, really everyone in this work, because the problem is so massive. But also building capacity among organizations and local governments to do this work better. Workforce development, of course, is always an incredible area that we need to continue to develop a people pipeline in this work, but also developing and disseminating and institutionalizing best practices, toolkits, the sort of work that we can do on the ground to help organizations do this work. But of course, also the research to show the evidence that is needed in the data to really help make the case, as Elisa was talking about, that really helps to demonstrate the impact of this work. And last slide, please. So really at the end of our report, we are making a call to really recommend that we act local. Really at the end of the day, acting locally and engaging right now, not waiting until say the end of a particular program, but really thinking about how right now, and I think, again, you've heard wonderful examples on this call, how we can all work together to move this work forward on multiple levels. So thank you so much for having us. And yeah, it's great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you both. I have read the report and enjoy it. And actually, I want to uplift two things that I just heard you say as you were presenting too. So building a broad constituency, that's some of the work that NDIA does, is building our affiliate base, but also there are other places that I think, if you should join NDIA for sure, but also locally, where are places that people plug in? So I know like a lot of library systems sometimes have things going on. Where are places that people can plug in? I mean, I could keep going. I know like there are coalitions. I know there are anchor institutions. I saw you had building Black Churches for Digital Equity, which is one of my favorite programs. I know that that's an anchor in Black communities. So where are other places that folks can plug in?
Well, I'll jump in quickly, and then Revati, if you wanted to follow up. So yes, absolutely. I think what are the local trusted places in your community? And also you can plug in by starting yourself. You can start a coalition. If you care about these issues, you can look to other people who are involved in this work, whether it's public libraries, schools, other places that are helping people get connected to the internet, learning digital literacy skills. But you yourself, even if there isn't anything started, you can start something just by beginning to have these conversations with people who are doing the work. Revati.
I know, I think you covered it. I'm sensitive of the time, so I want to try to get to as many questions as we can.
No, I need more time to come up with a good question. So
Gina's got some locked and loaded, I'm sure.
I do have another one.
Well, let me go to you in a second, Gina. I did want to say that for people that are particularly curious about the role of anchor institutions, I saw in the chat that someone in the group had not been familiar with Shelby, the schools, healthcare, library, broadband association. They're wonderful. And if anyone else is not familiar, they've long talked about a to and through strategy dealing with anchor institutions. So highly recommended. But Gina, let's hear your other question. Oh, you are muted. Ha! It happened to two of us.
It's my first day. You don't have an excuse. This one is more specific. So when I think but it's connected to to the anchor institutions and to local organizations doing this work. So digital navigators, we know, are a very important part of communities and a very important part of that human infrastructure piece, right? How can we bolster, so a question that came in is, how can we bolster the increasing need for community-based digital navigation?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of what we did in the project was try to identify the core complementary and coalition model is to sort of underline where specifically complementary organizations, so organizations that do other things, have added digital navigation services to their portfolio. And part of the sustainability framework that underscores the need for building a constituency is to do exactly what the question is getting to as well. But we have to make the argument that The human infrastructure of broadband is also the human infrastructure of telehealth. It's also the human infrastructure of education. It's also the human infrastructure of like affordable housing. So you are not going to be able to get access to services that are increasingly being pushed online without having the kinds of work that digital navigators are currently doing in communities across the country. Speaking of anchor institutions, I guess I'll also talk a little bit about for one of the case studies we did for the project was about the North Carolina community college system. And what we learned across complementary ones is that each kind of model has its own particular advantages. So for complementary organizations, they are really, really great for this work because they're coming in with both like an existing resource base and existing personal relationships. So very much that people already know about the healthcare organization in their community, people already know the community college, et cetera. The downside that I think we should talk about is also that because you're going to need additional resources and expertise to do this work. So that needs to be planned for in a more substantive way. And that's kind of what we're trying to get to with the sustainability framework. Because the worry is, if it's not core to your mission in the case of funding challenges, is that the work you drop first? And we want to make sure that that is not the outcome that we end up with. And partnerships for complementary organizations are also particularly essential. So I think that the North Carolina example, they talk about forming partnerships with community-based organizations. So it's what do they call it? Bringing class to the community, right? Something like that. And it's important how like nonprofits will provide space and will introduce you to other people that already trust that organization. Trust is like essential. And one of the things that came up a lot was how the loss of ACP has sort of violated the trust of people in our broader community because we told them that this was a service for them and now we took it away. First, we convinced them to sign up, and then we just took it away from them. So that's kind of our goal with the sustainability framework, is to think long-term and for this infrastructure to be robust and resilient.
Thank you. That reminds me of the way that you ended with the last slide and bringing it back there. Something that I feel that some legislatures still don't get, which is that this is permanent. This is going to be an ongoing thing. We still have to figure out electrification, and managing that system in different ways over the decades, but it doesn't go away. It's really important. Thank you both for taking the time to do that research and to share it with us.
Thank you so much.
And we encourage everyone else to read the report. It's great. Okay, Chris, we made it.
I'm pretty sure that was the cat from Men in Black. On Colin's desk there that Revati was getting allergic to. So cool. That was pretty cool. As we're wrapping up, Gina, I did want to say that one of the things that I'd like to have a little comment here at the end, which makes me feel better, is that I think sometimes people have this sense of like things are really hard and it's because humans are bad. And I have a different perspective, which is just that, like, depending on your faith, you may have different opinions. But when I look around the world, I see that the world itself is kind of uncaring. And I look at the fact that there is justice anywhere is generally a result of human activities. And we create the ideas of justice. And at times we then go back on them. And I think that there's a lot of hope in recognizing that when we do step back, we can step forward again. We can step forward more strongly. And people like this that are taking time to attend, to be inspired by Kyla, are a really big part of that. The other thing that I wanted to say is that we never give people enough time. That is by design. Like we're trying to expose people to more ideas. And so if you're sitting here being like, I really want to hear more from Elisa, I want to hear more from Virginia, I want to hear more from all these people. Yeah, we're with you. But trying to keep a show to just 75 minutes, we're not even limited to 60. We try to go for 75. It's still tight. So no disrespect to those folks. They're so good.
I would like to share a few words before we break too. So I just want to remind people what Kyla said. There's power in persistence. Continue to stand up, continue to fight, but also continue to celebrate your own personal and professional wins. I know it's hard right now, but find bright spots in your communities, enjoying your lives. One of the things I would also like to remind people of, join NDIA, please. Someone drop the link again. That would be nice. Also register for net inclusion before March 31st so you don't get charged those late registration rates.
We have a survey. Would love for people to give us thoughts on how this went, how we can do it better. Very much appreciate people that are able to do that. And I would like to say, Gina, you're wonderful to work with. We had a little panic attack there with your internet connection, but it's been perfect. Yeah,
it was meant to be.
Yeah, so I hope that your family hasn't been, like stuck in the back in the Stone Age because of this.
Yes, my husband did have to take his work downstairs. So that's fine. One thing we didn't do, we didn't thank all of our guests today. So thank you to Kyla, thank you to Elisa, thank you Amy, thank you Ravity, thank you Virginia, thank you Colin, thank you everyone who joined us today to share more with the community.
Yes, and thank you, Jordan, for producing. Jordan, also from Tifton, Georgia. I'll tell you, South Georgia is definitely punching above its weight producing those two fine folks. And Gina, it's been wonderful. I'll just say that I hope that Pamela is watching. Pamela, it was wonderful doing all those shows with you. And we miss you. Hope everything's well. And Gina, we look forward to do more shows as we move forward here.
Thank you so much. See you guys next time.